Hello, everybody. Hello, Gabrielle. Welcome back to another episode of Food and Mood Talks, Eating from Our Empowered Selves. And I am so excited to introduce the topic of this conversation. Who is eating? So, in this series, what we're trying to do is bring you the tools, the information, our previous experience, our experience with our clients on how to make a sustainable change in order for us to eat from an embodied and empowered self. And so we want to bring to you different modalities that we can that can help you really understand yourself and what it means to get to know ourselves, because we don't want to just get to know one part of ourselves. We want to get to know all parts of ourselves.
Absolutely. I'm really excited for this topic because the beginning of the work I do with any clients, whether it's one-on-one or in a group setting, is building self-awareness. I always say people come to me all the time with these amazing outcome goals, right? But we got to take like 10 steps back and we have to figure out where our current thoughts, actions, and behaviors are stemming from. So the goal of this conversation of the who is eating, Sarah is going to really relate the work that I do with clients, building the self-awareness, getting to the root of our thoughts, actions, and behaviors, and really connecting them to the IFS model, which she'll touch a little bit more upon. But the goals of these conversations is to really help you better understand the little voices in your head, and to better understand who is eating at the table, whether you're eating by yourself or whether you're eating in a social situation.
I love it. Yes, amazing. So let's jump in. So when we're talking about our inner table, for me, this is the best way to, because I'm a very visual person and I have so many different thoughts. But these thoughts, like I think nowadays we're trained to don't think of your, like, separate from your thoughts, right? Like meditation is about like getting rid of your thoughts. But what I love about this approach is that the founder, Rich Swartz of Internal Family Systems Therapy, which we're going to keep on integrating throughout the conversation because it's such a broad thing and it's a way of life. But he says instead of trying to transcend our ego, it's about building a relationship with our ego. So this is what I love, because these thoughts have meaning, right? If they're showing up over and over again, there is so much wisdom to them, but we need to understand and to be able to listen to them from a maybe more objective perspective. So the way that I relate to internal family systems as an inner table is that whenever we sit at a table, we're bringing a lot of our parts with us, right? Because like if you're sitting next to someone that you feel so good with, the eating experience is going to feel probably very natural. But if you're eating with someone that just like maybe makes you feel that you need to control the situation, all of these different parts are going to show up, right? So the dynamic completely changes in an instant. So being able to understand who is sitting at the table, who is making the decisions, right? Internally, what's going on? Does it feel like a food fight or is it like a sensual meal, right? And this can happen whether we're with people or whether we're alone.
And
So
Sarah, the goal of IFS therapy, internal family systems therapy, is the therapist is kind of there to help you figure out, right, of who these little voices in your head are, where they're coming from, really identifying them. Is that the goal of an IFS therapist with their client?
yes, the goal of an IFS therapist is to become like a self detector, right? And what do I mean by self? So self is like the sunshine, right? The sunshine, it's always around, but we get clouded, right? We get clouded because of emotions, because of past hurts, challenges, everything that's going on, that it kind of starts like making us think that there's no more sun, right? But the sun is always there. So this is number one in internal family systems therapy. The most important thing is remembering that we have a self. Like this is what allows us to make embodied decisions. And it's very much about centering in. And then what shows up is that the dynamic becomes like this, right? So then we have different categories of parts inside of us. So parts are like sub personalities that show up. It's like, I want the cookie. I want the cookie now. And the other part is like, you can't have the cookie. You've had a cookie yesterday. You cannot have a cookie today. But, and it's just like this battle, right? That feels just so real. And it's like both parts make sense. It's going to give me pleasure if I eat the cookie, but I did have a cookie yesterday and I'm trying to lose weight. So in this situation, we have the managers, which are the ones like, don't eat the cookie. You want to lose weight. You want to get fit. You want to get healthy, and we don't want to eat the cookie. But then maybe this part, which we call a firefighter, is like, I don't care what you're telling me. I'm going to eat the cookie because I'm the one who's in power here. So it becomes like a rebellion, right? This is like a simple example. So then we end up eating the cookie, and then the managers end up getting really upset because what they're trying to bring forth is to help us manage our life with control, self discipline, be organized, to keep things in order. And then the firefighter is trying to bring us pleasure, right? So this could be a very delicate conversation, but when these parts are burdened, it's usually because they're protecting the exiles. So
Mm.
the exiles are the parts of us that feel a big charge of emotion because we were usually shamed, we were manipulated, we were taken advantage of in our vulnerability and our innocence, very young parts usually, and they're very charged. So whenever there's something that's so fragile, these parts become obsessive in the roles, right? And the whole idea here is that the warmth that can decrease this fragility is the self energy. But what happens when we feel we have no self energy? When this is so freaking loud that the sunshine is completely blocked because we're so much in the cycle. So, this is the goal of internal family systems therapists, right? It's to bring in the self energy. And the way that we can know that self energy is present is because we have something called the 8 C's. So these 8 C's are what show us that we can connect more to the self energy. And these eight C's I think are super nice for us all to like meditate on because they are very expansive to our system. So it's calm, creative, connected, compassionate, confident, clarity, courageous, curiosity, and there's a ninth one that my other teacher brings in, which is choice, which I love because that is a very big key to empowerment, right? It's realizing that now we have choice.
So
And
it's almost like these impulsive actions or behaviors or thoughts that come up are a call to healing, right? So instead of like numbing it, shoving it down, ignoring it, this is where we have the opportunity, the choice, like you said, to look internally instead of looking externally.
exactly, because this sun, the self, it's internal, right? It's a connection that we have with ourselves. It's like, it's even like an alchemical process, I would say, it's not like needing to do anything. We call it unblend. So it's like this, it's like you're in a freaking blender, like everything is being mixed up. It's just like so much energy. The important thing here is to bring in self energy to realize we right now don't need to work so hard because these parts, we can bring some listening to the equation, and then we start unblending. Can these parts step aside so we can better hear them out? So it's a process of, it's a constrict release model, right? This is the cool thing about it. It's not an adding, it's we release these constrictions that have been built up for so many years.
And stop numbing and isolating and ignoring it. Instead, really begin to look internally and start healing and aligning with the self. That's beautiful. And that makes so much sense. And it also makes sense why so many people nowadays, especially, struggle with reaching this healthy, happy, true self. Which is the goal when anyone comes to probably you or I. It's like they want to feel happy, they want to feel healthy. And so they have these outcome goals of what happy and healthy looks like to them. But the way we live these days is we live on autopilot. We just go, go, go. We are so disconnected from ourselves. We are so disconnected from the root of our thoughts, actions, and behaviors. And we just live on autopilot all day, every day. And that disconnects us further from that self, which then the managers and the firefighters become stronger and stronger and stronger, constantly, protecting the exile, right? And just taking over and over again. And this is where people often will probably say, like, I feel out of control, because they are, when they're, I think, and this is how I look at it, is when they feel out of control, what that really means is they feel completely out of touch with their self, and that these roles are taking over in every situation when it comes, especially to like food and goals they have around health and wellness. So first step is to better get to know yourself. So Sarah, what I would love to do is give examples of tools and exercises I do with clients to help build self-awareness. But what I really want to hear from you is how this relates to the IFS system and how you see it through that lens.
Yeah, and just one thing I want to bring in before we continue, because I love that. It's they're not protecting the exile, they're protecting the exile from being seen, right? So there's usually like at whatever cost, hide it because they yeah, hide it because like this part just feels like it was overwhelming the system when it showed up. So then it's just like these parts just take up these roles, right? And it's just so important for them to protect because it's overwhelming the city, like the city, the system, it's like it really did feel like a life or death situation. So however our extreme parts are, they all have the intention to protect us, which I just find incredible. Like we are so wise. Our addictive process is extremely wise. It's so wise. So yeah, I just wanted to bring
Yeah,
that in.
no, that makes so much sense, right? Is because those, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but those parts, the exile is kind of what we've been like shamed from our whole life, or embarrassed to show, or told was wrong our whole life, or whatever it might have been. So we just have this natural instinct to hide it, continuous to hide it. Yeah.
Mm.
Awesome. Okay. So what I usually do with clients when I'm building self-awareness, because you and I can both agree that that is so important, no matter what change you want to make to become happier, healthier, more free, connected to that self, is first we got to get to know ourselves. What are our thoughts, actions, and behaviors? One, and then we can do the work to correlate them to maybe where they're stemming from with grace and compassion. So the first one I do is self-awareness triangle. So if I have clients who come to me and they say, I feel so out of control in this situation, I say, okay, let's talk a little bit more about it. How do you feel out of control? And this is a really common one. I work all day. I'm super stressed, running around with work, running around with the kids. I try my best to fuel throughout the day. And then it's nighttime. I'm sitting on the couch and I just like go on autopilot. I almost like black out. I see a box of the kids' cookies in the cabinet and I just eat the whole box. And I say, okay, well, let's build self-awareness first. Let's talk about your when, your where, and your what. So they say, okay, when is this usually happening? Where is this usually happening? What is happening? And then we build tactics to break out of that cycle that they keep feeling like they're getting stuck in week by week. How does that relate to IFS?
Oh, I love it. So it can relate. And so here the purpose would be to really see how the person relates and how they can connect with their parts to really hear them out. But I can give out this example of like, so the self-awareness, right? Maybe bringing in self-awareness, which is like, I want to do what Gabriella is telling me. I want to bring in self-awareness to this process, right? So this could be a manager because managers are usually the ones that want to do things right. They want to do things correct. They want to listen to the authority. In this case, it would be you, right? So it's like maybe this part shows up as a manager. Let's bring self-awareness to this process. And then the manager, and this is also flipped. And so yeah, these are the cookies. Um, so the manager is trying to bring in self-awareness and slowness into the process, but the firefighter might feel threatened by this manager because they're saying, maybe you're acting like the parent telling me you can't do this, right? Because this part feels so intensely with an agenda of needing to succeed to not eat the cookies, right? So then the firefighter might feel like threatened by this part. And it's like, before I even go into self-awareness, which is why a lot of people fear meditation, right? It's like really looking what's going on internally. I'm going to eat the whole box of cookies before I even get to like, before this part, takes control. So it's like very impulsive, very reactive because this part has a story. You know, it could be that it was never allowed to eat what it wanted, or it could be like eat your food quickly before you do this other chore that I also don't want to do. So it could be a whole waterfall of
Oh, okay. Wait, so I love this because when I build, so the when, where, what is a self-awareness, and that's more the manager, right? But then I always try to take it to the next step with clients and saying, okay, when we build this tactic, right, that the manager's building for you, your when, where, what, your tactic of how you're breaking that bad habit that you have, let's first figure out why you have that bad habit. So, and maybe this is where the firefighter can step in, and this is where it can be more of like a successful exercise instead of, you know, the firefighter manager competing here. It's more like, okay, well, let's figure out why we're having this bad habit, or maybe something really stressful is happening to you and your partner in your relationship, so you're filling an emotional void, an emotional gap, a stressor, by doing that when, where, what, by, you know, becoming so impulsive around the box of cookies. So instead of just being like, I'm gonna, if your tactic is just, I'm just gonna drink water and have one cookie and not eat the whole box. Okay, that can be a logistical and a manager based tactic. But then maybe this is also where we say, but what am I filling? What void am I filling? And how can I maybe become more self-aware, or work on my relationship so that I'm not filling that gap with the emotional eating.
right. Exactly. And that's the thing, right? Like I feel like this is beautiful because it happens in real time, right? It's like, how do I know really why this is happening? Like who's gonna give that answer, right? And I can be like I'm a client of IFS, right? I still take my IFS therapy, and it was always like, okay, but I don't know why it's happening. But the cool thing about it is because it's in real time. If we have enough if we're connected to enough self energy, we can just ask the part, right? We can ask like, what's going on? And here, the whole idea, because it's an ongoing thing, it's a way of life. It's understanding and listening to our protectors. So the managers and the firefighters are called protectors because they're protecting the exiles. So it's about a real time of listening, really like, what do I need right now in this moment? But we first need to be able to unblend from other parts because, for example, this part is showing up like, I'm just going to have a glass of water and one cookie. And it could be maybe another part showing up trying to make that happen. But then this is the cool thing about integrating IFS into goal setting, right? Because a goal could be, this could be the agenda of one part of us that's like, I'm just going to drink water and have a cookie. But there could be another part that feels so dreaded by this idea because it feels so scared, right? So it's about being able to like um listen to each part, right? So it's really interesting because also we have these exercises of viewing it. It could be in a landscape, right? Like, or in a table. It's like, okay, this part wants to do this part wants to do this. Who needs my attention right now? And
Mm.
then we can listen because then, okay, is it okay with this part that I give this attention to this part right now? And if it says no, we got to work with what shows up. Okay, no, tell me what's going on, right? And for all of this, we need self energy. And this is really the role of a therapist, but we can even do it ourselves when we're like, when we connect enough with that self energy, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay. And this is why I'm so excited to have these conversations, because it's like, yes, I'm here from the nutritional standpoint to build tactics, break bad habits, embody new ones, but it really takes this next step of digging even deeper to make it sustainable. And that's where this type of work is so important. So it's not just like a, you know, patch or a band-aid for now. It's like, okay, how can we make this real? How can we make this change? And of course, no change is permanent. It's an ongoing journey and process, but having the tools to make it as sustainable as we can. Okay, awesome. So we were talking a little bit about emotional eating. So that's a big thing that I work on with clients is getting in control. They often say to me is, I want to get in control of my emotional eating and my food addiction. That's a really common goal of clients. So some of the exercises we do is first understanding what emotional eating is. I do help clients understand that we are born to be emotional eaters. So we come out the womb screaming, crying babies. What's the one thing that makes us sleepy, happy, tired babies? it's milk. And that's because milk has carbohydrates that gives us fuel, that makes us releases our serotonin, our melatonin, our sleep, and our happy hormone. So being an emotional eater isn't necessarily a bad thing. That's like number one, I make sure people know. That just means you're human. And then, but it's getting to know that impulsive version of yourself, where it's stemming from, and how to make sustainable change, like we were just talking about. And then there's that idea of food addiction, but I also talk about it on like a mindset kind of brain perspective with when people say I'm addicted to food or how do I get in control of my food addiction. I say, well, let's back up and first understand what we mean by food addiction. So what I describe it as, we have three parts of the brain. We have our hypothalamus, which is where our hormones are sent that say I'm full, I'm satisfied, or I'm hungry. So it's kind of like the logical part of our brain. And then we have our prefrontal cortex, where our self-awareness and our self-control lives, our mindfulness lives. And then we have the reward system of our brain, where dopamine neurons get fired by the thought of certain foods. So maybe your certain favorite impulsive foods is cheesecake or salty crackers or whatever it might be. So we have these three parts of our brain that control our eating habits. And so when I explain this to clients, I say, when you feel like you're addicted to food or you feel like super impulsive around food, it's because the reward system of our brain is taking over. So the dopamine neurons got fired. Oh, the whole cheesecake in the fridge is going to make me feel happy and less stressed and relaxed and take away all my worries. So you eat the whole, you almost like blackout, go on autopilot. You eat the whole cheesecake. You don't feel any better after because what happened there was the reward system part of our brain took over. So it's just recognizing that pattern. But then what I do with clients is I talk about, okay, well, we need to build strength and create those new neural pathways in our prefrontal cortex of our brain, where our self-awareness and our mindfulness and our self-control lives. But I think a key aspect of building strength in our prefrontal cortex from the IFS lens is getting to know these roles that are having these conversations in your head when you see that cheesecake in the fridge after a long day, knowing where they're stemming from and knowing how that is allowing you to have the reward system of your brain take over in the moment. So I'd love to hear your perspective of that concept that I talk a lot about with clients from the IFS lens.
Yes, for sure. So I love what you're bringing here because it's also, it's, as you were talking, I was just thinking root chakra, right? Like the reward system is, we're craving that because there's a lack of safety in our system, right? So whenever there's a lack of safety, the amygdala is fire alarm, fire, 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 fire. Do whatever it takes to fix a situation, right? So oftentimes that could be like reward, right? We need some safety. Food is safety. Food is nourishment. Food is what's gonna help me relax, right? So it's not just like pleasure in the sense of I want joy. Like it's probably not that. It's more like I need safety, right? Like I'm not okay right now. And this is a survival mechanism, right? So this is usually when the firefighters show up, right? It's because it's a fire alarm. They are very dedicated to their jobs, right? Because for them, it's also a life or death situation. You know, we're stuck in all of these memories that are embodied in ourselves, right? What makes us think that we are not that anymore? Like just because time passed, it doesn't mean we're still living in that, right? So that's where the amygdala plays a huge role. So without feeling safety, we cannot make sane decisions. Even if the managers would want to make more sane decisions, they're probably super burdened because they're trying to keep the system afloat as well. So then it just becomes like a shit show, right? And it's so this is how I see the managers and the firefighters kind of interacting with that. And how we can bring safety is not necessarily with the neocortex, the prefrontal cortex of bringing logic in, but it's about bringing in a resonance, bringing in a feeling of I am not alone. Because the biggest fear of the exile, the biggest fear of the baby, of the infant, is being alone, being abandoned, and being thrown out, right? So this is what we need to bring with practice. It's more of the self energy to warm the system up a little bit and accurately show them that we're listening with all of the, you know, with the different self qualities. We can see how the parts feel in our presence, because the reason why they felt that they need to really strongly protect the system is because they felt threatened by self energy, right? They felt threatened and then they closed off. So what we need to do little by little is start bringing in this inner authority that comes from a place of centerment, you know, Buddha nature, or our higher self, or divine self, or whatever we want to call it. But it's this intelligence that is weaved in every single cell of the universe, right? So it's there inherently. And usually when the more burdened the system is, especially in the addictive process, there is this belief by these different categories of our parts that there is no self, right? So of course you're going to do whatever it takes to not be alone. And this is the only difference that we need to bring in. It's to bring in a little bit of this sun ray into our system.
Yeah, and that, I love that perspective, and I think it aligns really well with when I do say to clients, let's break that, let's let's take back our power. Let's not allow the reward system to always take over. But to do that, it's becoming more aligned with that self energy that you're talking about. So it's getting and stop ignoring it. Like, keeps coming up in our conversation because it's exactly what it's all about, is stop ignoring, stop numbing, stop running from whatever your self needs are, and instead become uncomfortable and become aware of them, and snap out of autopilot and become more connected to that self. And again, whatever that higher self is to you and what that looks like to you doesn't really matter. What matters is that you just do the work, the uncomfortable work of becoming more connected to it. And that's what's going to allow you to be more in control. And I don't like the word control because that sounds like a lot of, like, really specifically the manager. But what I mean is you feel empowered. That's the word I'm looking for, is that you feel empowered. So then when you're in that example situation of the cheesecake, right? Of like, okay, I've had a really long, stressful, emotional day. Lots of things are going on. My reward system is telling me to eat the cheesecake because it's going to make all my problems go away. When you are aligned with your self energy, you are more empowered to make an actual logical decision in that moment of like, okay, you know what? Actually, a slice of cheesecake would be really tasty, and I want that for joy. So I'm going to have a slice of cheesecake, but I'm also going to have that uncomfortable conversation with my boss that's causing me to feel so stressed out right now. And, so it's just making more of like a aligned and centered decision in the moment when you are acknowledging all the roles and coming to like your senses, which is a lot of that self energy work.
Yes, absolutely. And I want to repeat the 9 C's, because I feel like this would be really what our nature kind of goes towards, right? Calm, creative, connected, compassionate, confident, clarity, courageous, curiosity, and choice. These are all empowerment feelings, right? Without the need to control. Because, yeah, I get the distinction that you're bringing up. Like, it could be control from a manager, or it could be like the control as in not being so reactive to these different situations, right? So then by connecting with that self energy and reminding ourselves that, wow, these 9 C's actually feel really good to the system. And like, now that you were talking about the cheesecake, I think it's just, it's our bodies really are, they are our oracle, right? So it's like, instead of having to micromanage mentally, like usually when we're in self energy, we're very grounded, right? This, our root chakra feels stable, we feel safe. So then it's like, now that you're bringing the cheesecake, I'm like, ooh, cheesecake would sound like, it sounds super nice, right? So then I could like indulge in a cheesecake, but I know that if it was a part of me that was afraid, if I'm fearing or dreading a conversation with my mom that I know that she's gonna bring up parts of me that feel really, really ashamed and insecure, maybe that cheesecake would be kind of like be my savior, right? So if I start eating it, it's a totally different dynamic. But it's not about the cheesecake, right? It's about who is eating.
Mm-hmm. Who is eating. And I think that kind of wraps up this whole conversation really well, of when it comes time to goal setting for yourself, and whether that's like a weekly goal setting, a monthly goal setting, a lifelong goal setting, we need to set our goals with intention of taking all of this into play, and building that self-awareness, but having grace and compassion for yourself, getting to the root of it, building a plan, but not just a managerial plan, building a plan of breaking these unwanted habits because they don't align with your self energy, and embodying new habits, thought patterns, behaviors, whatever it is that do align with yourself. Because when you do that, those are the goals that are going to stay with you for good because they feel right, because that is you reaching that true self. So instead of building plans of, I'm going to not overeat this week because I want to lose weight, like instead of setting that goal, really think of think of all these moving pieces that get you to do what you're doing and then get you to break what you're doing, but at the same time align you to that true self.
Exactly. And I feel like this is why it like complements sort of like your work a lot, because you could come up with a goal that, you know, you feel would be very suitable for a client, right? But then it's also seeing how that client is developing. Like, how do they feel with that goal the next day, maybe? Like, because if they're not on board with the goal, then it doesn't matter how much of a list of things they need to do, it's just not going to work. So the most important thing is bringing, again, that self energy to be able to like really feel and tune into it. So again, as a constrict release model, we want to let go of the burdens instead of adding more. You know, we want to hear out these parts, and that's a relationship with our ego.
Yeah, and that's what it is hearing it out, building that relationship with your ego instead of just constantly ignoring it. And that's what it takes to be successful on a long term, instead of, we were saying, like, instead of just putting a patch on or a band-aid on of how is this tactic gonna get me through the next week or month, how is this going to heal me from the root, and allow for this long-term sustainable change. So I mean, I think the goal of this conversation, and Sarah, I would love to hear your perspective too, is just that we want you to first play around and have fun with it. So like when you're in a social situation or when you're eating alone or when you're goal setting, is to think about these different roles and how you can invite all to the party and acknowledge all and have grace and compassion for yourself, and then connect to that higher self, and then move in that direction and just become aware. Because I think probably at first, Sarah, it'll be a little bit difficult when you're trying to navigate these situations, right? When you're alone or when you're in these social situations of like the roles and the voices, and how to move past them.
Yeah, definitely. And I think also what we can do is we can attach just like a list of different like managers archetypes and firefighter archetypes, exile archetypes, so we can start building a relationship with them. Because again, this is not like a one day to the next. This is about building a relationship with ourselves, getting to know ourselves. So by asking, tuning in, like, okay, I am about to eat this whole box of cookies. That's okay. I just want to bring that up, and I want to see, what is this part feeling emotionally? What am I feeling emotionally? What
Mhm.
does this part need? Without micromanaging, right? Just the idea of building a relationship with ourselves makes life so much richer, so much richer.
And that could maybe even be like a journal exercise that you do when you're starting to introduce yourself to this work, of like maybe before or after you go to a social situation, or before or after you feel like you're emotionally eating, is to like journal this out of the roles and what these voices in your head are telling you, or how they're kind of like dictating your actions, and just journal on it. Where do you feel like it's coming from? And then when you do your goal setting, is to even like review these journal notes of you building this relationship with your ego, and building this self-awareness so that you can set goals that are aligned with your true self.
Yeah, and the last thing that I want to mention is the I'd say that more importantly than where are these thoughts coming from, it's just like what thoughts are showing up. Just getting to know our inner ecology, just getting to know it, because they will start speaking with us once they build trust. Once
Mhm.
they start trusting our self energy, then they're going to be opening up.
So it's just like stop and listen, really.
Stop and listen, and write it down. This is what I'm feeling. This is what I'm
Yeah.
about to do. Just
Yeah.
what's
And
going on
don't
right now.
judge it. Don't judge the thoughts that are coming up. Is just recognize them, write them down.
And whatever thought is judging, also just write that down, because that's just
Yeah.
another part.
That's
Yeah.
true. Write down that judging thought too. Awesome. Well, I think this is a really powerful conversation that takes goal setting, and consciousness when eating alone or eating in social situations to a whole nother level, that allows people to really figure out what's going on, and how we can really truly meet that true self, that happy, healthy, sustainable health and world and lifestyle that we're all striving for.
Yeah, thank you so much for everybody watching. Thank you, Gabrielle, and I'm excited for the next episode on eating from our empowered selves.
Thank you, Sarah. We'll see you all soon.